There you go. So welcome back to GoTo Pros series. We're so excited to be here with you today. Thank you very much. We have John and Sandra from Hemisphere Staffing with us. And just as a reminder for the audience, with our GoTo Pros series, we started this at the Innovation Center with the EDC, the Independent EDC. We started this because as we're working with startups and small businesses who are growing, there's so many good resources throughout the Kansas City metro area. And the independence community that we wanted to share those with the audience. And we get, last year we had over 600 calls of where do I go for? And we thought maybe this would be a great venue to offer that to people that are wanting to start their own business. They have a business idea to grow. And so we've, it's called the GoTo Biz Pro, or GoTo Biz series. Resources, pros, and peers, because the resources are the ecosystem like Xander and I and KC SourceLink and Digital Sandbox. The pros are professionals and professionals that they need to connect with and businesses need to connect with throughout the whole process. And then our peers are Innovation Center clients who have been there, done that. And a lot of times what we don't point out is that our we don't point out necessarily, and we should, our pros are entrepreneurs as well. So whether you're talking to legal or accounting or a business advisor or staffing agency, those are entrepreneurs that have jumped into the deep end, as as we say, to develop their own business. And a lot of times what we're asked, and so again, I want to do two things because I always forget. Want to invite the audience watching, if they have any questions, you can go ahead and post those. If you hear a disembodied voice come across the screen, that's our producer Xander, so he's helping us out today. And then also I want to thank WorksLab for allowing us to come in when there was a gap in the schedule. It's the co-working space that's at the Innovation Center, and we appreciate them allowing us to come into this space and to have the conversation
Absolutely.
with you. So thank you, John and Sandra, for being here today. We really appreciate it. We're so excited about talking about a workforce. And Hemisphere Staffing, you've got a great background in tech and business development. And you, John, started Hemisphere Staffing because you also saw there was a gap between what employers are seeking and what employees are looking towards. So really, when we talk about small business, so thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So as we talk about small businesses and them growing their workforce, whether it's a startup or whether it's a business that's well established and they're ready to roll, as an employer, what should they look for in a team right now? What do you help them with, and what do they typically look for in a team?
Sure. Some of the trends I see and what we help them with is, before we do anything, I like to take a look at their existing workforce.
Oh, sure.
And I want to know what the personalities are within that workforce. You know, what's going on within your team. Even more than that, I want to know what are your cultural values? What are you looking for in your employee? As a staffing agency, I can provide you tons of resumes that 100% line up with what's in that job description or that rec order, as we call it on our end. But if that individual does not line up from a cultural standpoint, it won't work. And knowing that, and knowing, you know, the cost per hire and also cost for training, anything under, I would say 6 to 8 months, you're losing money, you know. And understanding that, we really staff for culture.
So you really want to connect with the employer. It's not just about bringing people into the workforce. No. It's not about just bringing introducing them to employees and saying, here's some resumes, take care of it. You really want to look at what the culture is of the company. You want to see how this person can fit in, because you want that to be a successful relationship.
Absolutely.
And you can really handle, when we were talking offline, you were talking about that full service.
Yes. And that full service starts with, we provide contingency-based staffing for your workforce. So you may have a spike in your business demands where you need, let's say, from 6 to 50 employees, or very quick, or bodies, but the business demand does not dictate that it needs to be full time. Well, you can reach out to us and we'll help provide the temporary workforce that you need. Or it may be a temp to hire situation where you're like, you know what, we want to try them out, and if we like them, we'll convert them to a full-time employee with benefits and things of that nature. and we're able to help with that. Or maybe just, hey, we have grown, we have a budget for 6 new employees, can you help us? Yes, we can.
Oh, there you go. So from that perspective, what should an employer have in place when they're getting ready to hire? What do they need to have already articulated to help that transition as they're growing?
I think the first thing that they need to understand is the client experience. It's all about the client experience, and that being the candidate. So from the first time speaking with them to following up, whether they've been accepted or denied, going forward in the interview process, to eventually onboarding. Onboarding is so critical. When they come in, they need to know the expectations, that the HR paperwork needs to be done accordingly. Even IT, from emails being set up, phone, Skype, that process there needs to be seamless, because that, again, is building and adding to that candidate experience. Because we also have to realize these new people are part of your workforce, and they know people as well. And if you are building a certain culture, they can tell you, hey, I have a great friend who will be awesome here. But if that candidate experience is not great and the onboarding is not good, it's not seamless,
sure,
you're gonna have issues.
Oh yeah. So from that's a really, really good point. Is that's the first impression. So
Yes,
as they come into the office, the first impression that they have, whether it's the first week or the first month, you've got to make sure that it's a sincere
Yes.
effort to be able to welcome that person in. But that's a great, I think that's a great transition into really the employee perspective or the client perspective. So when we talk about the client, the employee or not the employee, but the person who's the job seeker, or they're looking to find their team because they're transitioning, what are some of the things they need to think about as we're talking about placing them as well?
I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here. If I were a candidate looking, as they're interviewing me, I'm interviewing them.
Okay.
I want to know, what's your culture? What were you founded on? Why are you hiring? Why did the last person leave? There's things I want to know from my employer. I want to know, who's my direct report? How do I communicate with them? Are they a morning person? Are they a night person? Are they grumpy all the time? Why? I want to know exactly what it is I'm walking into.
Oh, sure. That and I think that's really probably a shift in mindset from both sides of that table.
Yes.
As you're setting down, from looking at the employer perspective and the small business perspective, whether you're a startup or you're growing. And I tend to focus on small business because that's who we work with, but we're talking about across the business spectrum. It's not just about finding people that have skills or that you can train. It's also about that person that's wanting to come into it. So from a client perspective, is there something that they need to do to prepare themselves? From a job seeker perspective, is there something that they need to do to prepare themselves to go into, say, a startup or a small business culture?
Yes, I would honestly recommend that they do their research on that company and know, where are you at today? Give me a truthful answer. Where are you today? Where do you plan on being tomorrow? And that old age adage, what's your 1, 3, and 5 year plan?
Okay, yeah.
Where are we going? Where's this ship going?
That's really important. That's so interesting to me, because as we're talking about business planning, we talk about the business plan and really having that vision of 1, 3, and 5 years. And we've had, entrepreneurs that come in and say, I'm not going to do a business plan. I don't want to do a business plan. I'm not going to sit down and write that 50-page report. Well, it's not a report. It's just an ability to be able to articulate. And from a job seeker perspective, having that already in your brain, you already know that, but being able to articulate that to somebody who's coming onto your team.
Absolutely. And because if I were the job seeker, I want to know, what's your mission statement? And I'll share an experience that I had with a prior client in another venture. He asked me, he said, John, what what's your mission statement? Because I provided him with our media kit, and he took it and turned it over. And I said, he said, I want to stop you right there. He said, the fact that you cannot articulate to me what your mission statement is or your values means it's propaganda.
Ah.
And I said, whoa.
Okay.
So he taught me very early in business, when you have your values, people connect with stories. They connect with what you stand for. Mm-hmm. And if I'm a job seeker, I want to know, what does this company stand for? Because, again, if we're not values aligned, I cannot be an asset to you. Sure.
How have you seen the industry change over a course of the last 15 years? I mean, and the reason I say that is because I've been around a long time, and I've been around the workforce both as an entrepreneur and as an employee. Mm-hmm. So I've seen transition in, but you're in the biz. So and we talk about we love working with millennials because they're inventive, they've got an idea, they're tied to social entrepreneurism.
Yes, they are.
But you've said the word culture an awful lot during this conversation. I can't help but think that is somewhat influenced by that entering workforce, and a workforce who's kind of been there, done that, and is maybe transitioning back into the workforce or into a new position. That culture is going to be important across the board then. So what are the changes that you've seen?
The biggest changes that I've seen is the entry of the millennial into the workforce. You hear a lot of complaints and grumblings about the millennials and things of that nature, but I absolutely love the millennial, because you have to understand them. They're not motivated by money. So I don't care how much money you throw, they have to feel important, wanted, valued. And what you see now is that the biggest disconnect is throughout corporate, throughout business, you have baby boomers and Gen Y that are in the corporate settings or in the C-level suites and above, and they cannot communicate. There's a huge communication gap between Generation X, Y, and millennials. So you have to understand how to communicate with the millennials. What do they stand for? What's important to them? What's not important to them? And even more so, corporate Y, you need to understand, how do you communicate with this person? Are they introverted? Are they extroverted? Are they intuitive? Are they perceptive? Are they in their feelings? You need to know what's going on with each member in your team, because that directly impacts how you communicate with them, how you recognize them. Everybody doesn't want public display of affection, not affection, but affection. Yeah. In the workplace, some people just give me a gift card and I'm okay.
Yeah.
Just shake my hand and pat me on the back and say, "Good job, do that again," or give me money. Yeah. But you have to understand that individual. So it does take a high level of emotional intelligence in the workforce now, because you're dealing with X, Y, and millennials, and still some baby boomers. So the workforce is very diverse. Yeah,
us baby boomers are still in the marketplace.
So that's Absolutely.
So you have like 5 generations in the marketplace, and that's not any different. There's always been 5 generations in the marketplace.
Very much.
But how do you continue to move that along, right?
The hardest thing, and I say it, is truly being brutally honest with yourself and your company.
Yeah.
You know what, guys? We stink at communicating. Guys, we stink as far as our retention. We let go of people quickly. Maybe we just didn't understand how to communicate with them. Maybe we need to move them from the middle seat in the bus to the front. They're better in this seat here. Sometimes it's just simply moving people around, but until you have actually taken the time to look at your workforce with data and metrics, you don't know what you're dealing with. And so I really feel that that's very important. That's one of the things that we do here. We look at the workforce. We look at who we're dealing with from the client side and also from the candidate side. And even more so, when we're looking at those resumes, there's things that we pick up in communicating with the candidate that's not on their resume. People have had tons of jobs and experiences. It's impossible to list it all.
Sure.
You really only want to see one resume. If you are in an HR or talent acquisition position, you do not have time to flip through 6 pages of a resume to get a feel.
Right.
And so when you have a partner in staffing, not a vendor, but a partner, that partner can tell you, I've spoken with this person. I know what we spoke about, what you said you're looking for. This is your candidate. And building that trust.
Oh, sure.
Because guess what? If I'm wrong, you have a guarantee with me. So
Oh, okay.
I'm making a stake that I'm right. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy to replace it.
So it's really about finding it's not all about personality and aptitude. It's also looking at that, you mentioned data and metrics. It's also looking at kind of the psychographic profile.
Yes.
And that's just really kind of the fancy word for habitual.
Habitual, yes.
What are the habitual pieces of the puzzle that make up that employee piece?
Correct.
And then from an employer perspective, how do you articulate that, yes, we do have schedules? If you're going into manufacturing, if you're going into shipping, if you're going into anything like that, and you've got a schedule component, what we hear often as economic development groups is we're having a hard time finding workforce that wants to go into a structured environment because they are a little bit more freeform than what we've worked with in the past. So is it just a matter of articulating articulating those expectations that, hey, we're going to have a schedule here, and hey, there is an expectation, and making sure those expectations are on the table?
Yes, and I truly believe that the expectation has to be communicated from the client to the staffing agency, which means we have to be on our game. We have to do the best we can. We have to convey. It also goes back to the understanding the demographic and also the feelings and perception of the individuals that you are recommending. Again, the broad spectrum of the workforce, millennials, Gen X, Gen Y. If you know what you're dealing with from that perspective, with those metrics, you can clearly set expectations with both parties.
Well, I think from a perspective, from an employer perspective, you want to look at that, especially as a small business.
Absolutely.
As you're bringing a team in, it's so critical to have to understand the different, not only the individual, the culture that they're bringing to, but you said at the very first of this, you talked about network, and that each one of them has their own network that they bring to the table. And what we find as, what I would think from a small organizational, share that network and share their talents, that's a huge asset, because you want to build a team. It's not just build a workforce, it's build a team. And you want to be able to leverage as much of their expertise and skill base as you can, and without taking advantage. I'm not implying that at all, but that you can, right?
Absolutely. And I'll let Sandra speak to that, because she's had a wealth of experience in where she's been, and I think I love her story. I love where she's been and the experience that she brings, the knowledge that she brings to Hemisphere. So I'm going to let you talk to that. So.
Thanks, John. Really, if you peel everything away, all the logistics and fancy, fluffy words, we spend the best hours of our day, the best days of our week with each other. And so, not that you have to be BFFs or family, but
because it is business.
It is business, right?
That's right.
But we do have to learn to be able to interact with each other. And so I appreciate employers when they place ads, even though it's not a marketable skill, it's a soft skill to be sports-minded. To be able to work in a fast-paced environment, those kind of things. Those are things that you have to know coming on board. From a candidate's perspective, it's nice when you walk into a new situation to know, do I have the tools that I need? Will I have the training that I need? Do I have the support that I need? What are the rules? Because I don't want to go in blinded and then all of a sudden I'm breaking rules and I don't know what I'm doing.
Sure.
So it's nice. That's kind of a twofold answer from a candidate, what we expect, and how an employer can be prepared.
Sure.
Okay, so when they're onboarding someone new, that person needs to be given everything they need so that they can fulfill the employer's expectation, and be given that an ample amount of time and the support that they need. And as a candidate, it's nice to know where you do fit in. And sometimes it's more than just a warm body in a chair or a warm body in the warehouse. And it's also nice to know on the front end, am I going to be here a long time? Is there a chance that I could become full-time?
And that's whether it's contingency or whether or a full-time hire, right?
Right. So it's nice knowing that going in, because what if you go in there thinking, man, I could make this a career of a lifetime, and then come to find out in 3 to 6 months, sorry, we're going to have to let you go. And so that way you don't go in with false hopes. So just definitely having those lines of communication open are very crucial. And just keeping things out in the open, and expectations like you were talking about, and making sure it's a good fit like you were talking about. And the beautiful thing about temp to hire is it's not only good for the employer to see if the employee is a good fit for their organization, but it's good for the candidate to see, I've tried this on, I think I could make a go of it, or no, this really isn't a good fit for me, and then come back to us and say, okay, this is what I like, this is what I didn't like, and we go, okay, great, now we've got something real to work with, and then we can go on to the next thing.
And I want to piggyback on that, Sandra. That's an excellent point. That exit interview, if you're able to get them, are so critical to not only the staffing company, but also to the client, our client, because we can say, hey, we missed the boat here. And then, again, metrics, we can see the trends. Hey, we're consistently missing the boat on solid expectations. We're not communicating this clear enough. So what do we need to do better to make sure that you are having, that the client experience is the best? We need to protect the employer brand, ours and yours.
Yeah. And so your client really is that, well, on both sides, you want to make sure it's a good fit for the resumes that you have and the people that you're working with, that you're bringing to the table. Your client is that employer who's really looking for someone who's going to invest in their company, whether it's just for a temporary portion of time or whether it's going to be a longer term relationship there, and to help the company grow. And I think that's a win-win for everybody, that
Absolutely.
you can set those expectations and set really the tone and the culture, as you've talked about, from the very onset. So even if you're a small company or an entrepreneur and you don't have the policies and procedures and everything in place, that's also something you can help guide them to or have resources for. Going from and growing from, as a small business resource, next week we're going to be talking to, or not next week, on Thursday at 9 o'clock, we're going to be talking to Jenny Crimmins with Crimmins Law, and she's an HR attorney, talking to her about going from U to 2. So you've just grown your workforce by 100%. Your company's just grown by 100%.
You really have, yes.
And so knowing really what, and so I'm looking forward to that conversation, but really identifying, and I so appreciate your time today, because that's awesome to learn from a perspective, from an HR perspective, about the environment, the culture, what you can do as an employer to prepare yourself for that new employee coming in, what you can look for as a business, but also what you can look for as someone who's looking into the workforce and going into, they are looking for startup culture or small business culture or manufacturing culture or warehousing. They know their aptitudes, and being able to articulate that is really, really important.
It is. And the last thing I wanted to share was, when you spoke of bringing in new clients, I'm a big stickler on, we need to know exactly how long is it before we break even with this employee, because we have to keep retraining, we're spending money, and ultimately we're going to close our doors, because if it takes $4,500 for your cost per hire and another $5,500 to train them, that's $10,000. At a $12 per hour pay rate, you're not making your money back to month 8. So if you are replacing them at month 6, you're in trouble. You cannot operate and sustain at that level.
Sure. Oh, well, and that's a real good point, to look at the actually real hard dollar costs on new employees too. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We appreciate this. And again, the next GoTo Pro is going to be Thursday at 9 o'clock. And please join us then, 9-ish. I guess I said, since we had a little technical difficulty this morning. If you aren't watching now, then this will be posted on our Innovation Center Facebook, and you can go on the Facebook page and watch it anytime. So thanks again for being here. We appreciate the conversation, and thanks to the audience out there, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Call us.